All right, 6 o'clock. Going to call this meeting to order. Kim.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Today's work session is for the Emergency Cold Weather Event Plan. And actually, your presenter today is our Emergency Manager and Fire Chief, Dave Hargis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This has kind of been an ongoing process. We dealt with this a little bit last year with the extreme cold weather event we had in February. So I'll kind of start through. I want to make sure everybody realizes that this is a plan for an emergency cold weather event. This isn't to deal with the global issue of the unhoused or the homeless population in and around the city or the region. That's not what the intent of this is at all, because that's going to be a much broader conversation with a lot of other players outside of the emergency departments and the public safety departments. So I just wanted to make sure everybody's clear on that going in. This is solely intended to concentrate on issues that are come up during this winter when we have an extreme cold weather event. It's the time frame, and this is kind of, I looked at a lot of national plans and other municipalities that are in cold weather states. Typically, these run November 1st through March 31st. That just kind of gives it a time frame. If there's events before or after those time frames, we're still going to deal with those. But in order to set up a plan, we put a time frame on it. So the extreme cold weather event is going to be triggered by a high forecast of 20 degrees or below. And that's expected throughout a 24-hour period that it's going to be at those temperatures or below. Or if a wind chill warning is issued, and the wind chill warning is issued when there's forecast temperatures to be, the wind chill's forecast to be minus 30 or below for the next 24 to 48 hours. And that increases the odds of the wind chill is also associated with frostbite times. So that's getting down in there where you're getting less than 30 minutes for exposed skins to have frostbite. So that's why it's considered an extreme cold weather event.
What temperature was that again? Did you say 20
20
below
degrees
or below?
for
Okay.
the forecast high temperatures.
for the forecast high during
Yes.
the day? Okay.
The plan is going to include different strategies. We're going to have daytime warming centers, regional shelters, and then the use of the Northland Assistance Center. During the day, all the city buildings will be open during normal business hours and operating unless there's snow events that cause them to close. Every place will be open. Anybody that's unhoused or homeless seeking some place to warm up through the day can come into the lobbies of those facilities and stay warm throughout the day. There won't be any availability for them to sleep there during the night, but during the day they'll be able to come in and get warm up. Hopefully somebody in the city facility will give them some of the information that I've put out on how to get assistance. So that would be kind of a dual fold thing there. As you can see, the library, city hall lobby, police department lobby, and the Parks and Recreation building are those buildings that are included. Our first line of response when we have individuals that are needing to be sheltered or taken out of the weather is going to be the regional shelters. And that's the regional facilities listed here. A lot of people think of them as Kansas City resources, but they're actual regional resources that are the charitable organizations. And our main focus is to get those individuals to those shelters, because those shelters not only provide them a place to sleep, they have food, they have hygiene facilities for them to use, and they have the auxiliary wraparound resources of trained staff to deal with any mental or behavioral issues those people may have, or substance abuse issues they have. So they have trained people to deal with those. And sometimes the people getting to that shelter can then get into some transitional housing or other help with problems they're having or causes of their being unhoused.
What does RSO stand for?
RSO is for registered sex offenders. The City Union Mission Family Center is across the street from a park, so the ordinances don't allow registered sex offenders to live in those. So that's most of the places will accept service pets, service animals, but not pets. Restart does allow some pets. So those are some of the things associated with those regional facilities. But going on with that, the Kansas City, Missouri Emergency Management Department has a dashboard available. I'm going to show you a picture of it later. Every day at 12:30, all these shelters will post their available beds for that day. So that when it gets cold, you can go on, any one of you, I can go on to the Kansas City, Missouri website and see the dashboard of all the bed availabilities for the different types of people and the different facilities. So, and our goal is if we have people needing assistance, we can either use the police department has offered to, we can house them here and take them over in the police department. The ATA bus line is going to be running when it gets below 32 degrees in Kansas City. People can get on there to warm up, and those buses will also be transporting to the shelters. They're going to run the routes that will transport those people to the shelters. So that's what we want to do regionally, and I want us to be in part of that, is to use these shelters because this is what they're set up for. When they get to 75% of their capacity, Kansas City is going to look at opening up alternative shelters, and we'll be able to utilize those as well, so that there'll be overflows.
When you say alternative shelters, are these other nonprofits, or will those be Kansas City?
It could be Kansas City community buildings.
Okay.
But that's going to be the last line. They did that with Bartle Hall last year, and that's part of the reason that we got together on this. Is what happened with that is when they opened Bartle Hall, most of the shelters have rules and regulations, and when they open up a large area like that, what happened was a lot of those people left the shelters to go to the other facilities because it was easier for them to do. And so we're taking the people out of where they need to be and putting them somewhere else. So that's where we're trying to concentrate on making sure before we go to any other steps that we're filling those regional shelters up. Because those shelters are the places where the people can not only stay warm, but they can actually get help, and sometimes the help that they need to get out of the situations they're in. So that's our first line. We also have a place we can take people. It's called the KCATC, which is the Kansas City Assessment Triage Center. It was developed in conjunction with the local emergency departments. When we run somebody that's needing assistance, but they may not need to go to the emergency room, our medical director has given us certain parameters where we can take these people to the Kansas City Triage Center, and they take them in and get them help for substance abuse, behavioral problems, and things like that, and keep them out of the hospital situation. So that's another avenue for people that might not get into a shelter due to their state of inebriation or their behavioral issues. Then I just want to reiterate here, the regional shelters have the trained staff available to deal with these issues during the cold weather. A lot of them, even if their bed capacities say they're full, they'll make a place for somebody if we bring somebody down to them so that they're not out in the cold.
Can you have a general idea of where most of those facilities are located? I think some are. When we get down to the further slide, it's got the addresses of all of them. Okay, perfect. Thank
So.
you.
Then we get to the part where the shelters are full. We have somebody come in. The police department identifies somebody on the street to a call. We go on a call, somebody needing that shelter. We have the Northland Assistance Center, which is right behind the city hall here. Rita Pierce runs it. They do year-round work, helping people with rent and utility bills. And they also, in the wintertime, will put people up, pay for people to get sheltered during the cold weather events. And this is kind of our fallback on that. The only caveat, these people will need some type of ID or provide a social security number, and that's for security reasons and to do a background check. But this is kind of our backup plan. We used Rita some last year for a couple of issues they were taking care of for us. And then again, we want to use the regional resources because we don't want to inundate her with people that can go elsewhere. So that's the whole thing. But this is kind of our backup plan. We've talked to Rita about this. I think on the agenda tonight there's a MOU with that organization to provide some funding for this, her to be part of this program. So,
Councilmember
yes,
Smith.
sir. One of the facilities, Lions House, is in Kansas City, Kansas, but that's it. And there's really nothing involved in the Northland either, except for Rita's organization, because Clay County and the Northland were really behind on any organizations or sheltering in this area. So Clay County Emergency Management right now is putting together a kind of a task book to show what's available in each of the jurisdictions in the county, and it's not good.
I was going to say that'd be a pretty thin book.
Yes. So there is a center up on Englewood that's starting up. I've had some conversations with her right now. They're doing some daytime sheltering for families and individuals that can come up and use a laundry and take a shower certain days of the week, certain hours of the day. I haven't included any of that because she was talking to the city. She's in the city of Gladstone. They were talking about codes issues and things like that with where they're located. So that's something hopefully we can tap into. Her and I have had several conversations that we can use her as a resource as well in that organization and maybe partner with them at some point to provide assistance for our citizens. This plan was put together based on our previous experience over the last couple of years. I've been working I've been attending the Kansas City, Missouri Homeless Task Force meetings, been part of those conversations. And this is all what I put together for North Kansas City. It seems like kind of a simple plan, but it's based on previous experiences and what we think should be best practices going forward. So, and this isn't set in stone. The first time we go to use this, we may completely change it up because it's like anything else. You know, if you can't adapt, you're not going to make it. And Mike Tyson said, your plan's great till you step in the ring and somebody hits you in the face. So, hopefully this is going to work. If this doesn't work, we will make something work. We're committed to public safety that we're not going to lose anybody on the street.
I'll just say, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. Last year we really started with nothing. And so to scramble, it was really eye-opening when we had that cold streak.
Yeah.
To see the response. I mean, not just here, regionally. So I appreciate you taking the time, working with Kansas City and putting this together so far. Councilmember Smith.
So I like what you said about taking them to shelters where there's resources and trained staff available. It does feel like, given what happened last year, that a larger shelter will almost be inevitable, like the Bartle Hall situation. In that case, are there lessons learned from last year where we had so many at Bartle Hall? Were there things that happened there? Were there like fights or anything like that?
Yes.
Okay. So
That's why the task force has been meeting for a couple of months now on how to avoid those situations, because also like I said, when they opened that shelter at Bartle, those people left the actual shelters, so they had 400 people in Bartle Hall, and they had 400 beds available in the regional shelters. Right. So that doesn't work. So that's what this whole thing is put together, trying to do that. And I've luckily been able to have the connections that we've kind of been able to tag along and get the expertise with them over there. It's how it's supposed to work as a region. So then there's the unfortunate reality. Although we clearly have an obligation to ensure people's safety, they have the right to make their own decisions. Just because you see somebody out in the cold or somebody sees somebody out in the cold, we can't force them to go to a shelter. They have that right to make their own decision, just the same as they do if we show up in the ambulance and a person refuses service. If they're alert and oriented and can answer the proper questions, we can't force them to go. So even if that decision they're making is going to cost them their life or a limb, at that point, until they we're unconscious or in a medical state that we can transport them to somewhere, that's just the reality of of our life and our country, that everybody has that right to make their own personal decisions on what they want to do.
Councilmember Smith.
Follow up on that, is there any effort that is being made to kind of go to known homeless settlements or camps where people might be gathered to let them know about these options? I know that there was a fire last time it got really cold on the north bank of the river that I believe was started by somebody trying to be warm. Is there going to be an effort to kind of head that off and get the word out about it, or is it just kind of if people reach out, then we?
There are outreach groups that go to each of these camps on a regular basis, and they take blankets. Some of those were at our last task force meeting, and they go out and regularly, and some of the stuff I'll show you, they're taking out and distributing to the camps, to the people, and they've been doing that for a while now, because the time to get them into the shelters is before it's 20 degrees. We know it's Kansas City, we know it's going to be cold. Those outreach groups are working to get those individuals, tell them what's available and try to help them get into those shelters. Unfortunately, a lot of the people that live in the camps and things like that don't want to go to the shelters till they have to go to the shelter.
And I'm hoping that the next step will be to get a really regional approach, including Kansas City, Kansas, Johnson County, because there are people in those areas that certainly are in need too. And we can't actually ignore them just because there's a state line. But what you've done so far in putting things together is really quite amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm going to show you some of the additional resources. This is kind of a picture of the capacity dashboard. I screenshotted this yesterday. This is what's updated at 12:30 every afternoon by the shelters, and it's on that website. There is where you can go to, and it'll show you that live picture. So when we get to there, if we see a bed available, we can call that shelter, arrange for intake, and we're going to put all the city buildings have some of these resource papers out there, and it doesn't have to be the police or the fire department that initiates helping somebody get to a shelter. Anybody in the community, if they see somebody or they know of somebody that they regularly give something to or something, they can call the numbers as well and help these people get into a shelter. So,
Let me ask, so locally, have you put this out to like River North or the Business Council yet?
I have not.
Because there are a lot, you see on the Armor Road storefronts, I know people tend to.
That's a
go in and out.
great idea. I hadn't thought about that. KCATA, they're going to provide, they don't have the capacity to do where they park a bus and use it for a warming center because they have to have a driver and a security person on that, and they just don't have the personnel to provide for that right now. But they are going to let people get on the bus and ride and stay warm all day, and they're committed to keeping the routes open, weather permitting, to take people to the shelters. They're going to keep those routes operating to get people to the shelters. And it doesn't help, most of the homeless people don't have Twitter or computers, but if they're working with somebody, those routes are on their Twitter feed. And that takes effect. The Kansas City, their stuff, they'll open that up at 32 degrees or below for a high temperature. So they're a little bit earlier than we are, but they have a lot more resources than we do to deal with this stuff. This is the shelters. The locations are on here on the address. This sheet with a couple of other numbers and a QR code is in all the, like I said, I've placed it in all the city lobbies. There's copies out here if you want to pick one up tonight. This is the facilities, who they can accept, what their intake times are. And a lot of times the public safety, we can get a hold of them if it's in the middle of the night and get somebody in.
That's what I was going to ask, 'cause it looks like the intake times end, mid-early afternoon.
But typically, we're going to be seeing these people throughout the day. running calls, the PD, when they're out doing their patrol, they're looking for the, they're observing, seeing people that may need help, especially when the temperatures get down like this. So the QR code on the sheet goes to, this is called a street sheet. This is put out by the Kansas City Library. Every month, all the numbers are updated and rechecked, so everything's accurate on this, are supposed to be as accurate as can be every month. You can sign up on a website to get this. They'll email it to you once a month. And this is just a list of a lot of resources. I know in the EIC committee, they were talking about how they could help do things. These are resources they can volunteer for or donate, provide a lot of different things in the region. Like I said, these are, even though a lot of this stuff is in Kansas City, they're regional groups that are doing this. And there's a lot of things that you don't think about that you see on here that are groups are out there to do, and a lot of it's just education, that knowing where to send somebody to get help. And with that, that's kind of my conclusion tonight. If you guys have any more questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Is there a way we can get a copy of the presentation, Chief?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I can email it out to the bunch.
Again, Councilmember Tall.
How long have you worked for the city?
A little over 30 years.
I just think we're really fortunate to have the connections that you have and the years that you've put in, because it does make the most sense to work with things that are already in place. And I think that's only possible because of the bridges that you've built. So thank you.
Well, and just remember too, though, sometimes I may come back to you and ask for, we may have to pay some of these favors back occasionally, but I try not to bet outside my pocketbook. So,
Again, I appreciate all the effort you put into doing this, so thank you. If there are no further council member questions, we will adjourn. Thank you.
thank you.
Should I?